Ni hao, superhumans. I'm Jonathan Oxer, and this is SuperHouse. Today I'm at ITEAD Studio in Shenzhen, China. If you have used a Sonoff, this is the place that they were born. You've probably seen Sonoffs in my previous videos. I've done quite a few episodes about them, and they're very popular for home automation. ITEAD has been focusing on the Sonoff for the last 3 years now as a really big emerging product area. So I've come to China to visit ITEAD, have a look at what they're doing. What we're going to do is take you for a little look around their office. We're going to look at some different Sonoff models, and hopefully we will get a chance to see their warehouse and their factory so that you can see how the Sonoff is manufactured. But before we take a look around inside ITEAD, it's important to know a little bit about its location and why this city is so important to the electronics industry. If they were asked to name the center of the tech world, most people would say Silicon Valley, or San Francisco, or perhaps Washington, where Microsoft is located. Not many people in the West have heard of Shenzhen, China, but for the last couple of decades it's probably been the most important city in the world for the electronics industry. In the 1970s, Shenzhen was just an insignificant fishing village with a population of about 30,000 people, located in the southeast corner of China, not far from Hong Kong. But everything changed in May 1980 when Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping declared that Shenzhen would become a special economic zone. The zone was intended to be a protected area with different rules to the rest of China, as an experiment in combining market capitalism with the ideals of socialism. Shenzhen was chosen as the location of this experiment because of its proximity to Hong Kong while being located on the Chinese mainland. This meant that it could use Hong Kong as a trading gateway to the rest of the world, while keeping the experiment contained within a small geographic area on the mainland. Walls and checkpoints were built to isolate Shenzhen from the rest of China, and the experiment began. That experiment turned out to be a bigger success than anyone's wildest dreams. Investors poured in money, companies sprung up, factories were built, and Shenzhen became a hive of manufacturing activity. Shenzhen now has an official population of about 11 million people, but that doesn't tell the full story. The official figures only include people living within the defined administrative boundaries of the city, and it doesn't include transient workers who are in the city for less than 6 months of the year. The actual population of the city at any one time is probably closer to about 23 to 27 million people. Locals will proudly tell you that they went from 25,000 to 25 million in 25 years, which is probably not too far from the truth. The GDP of the city is officially around $300 billion per year, but again that's only for the main city area itself. The actual number is probably pretty much higher when you factor in the outlying regions. Shenzhen is the hometown of a huge number of multi-billion-dollar companies, including Huawei, DJI, Hytera, BYD, Tencent, ZTE, and TP-Link. Many of them are companies you probably haven't heard of unless you've spent time in China. For example, BYD is unknown in the West, but they're the largest supplier of rechargeable batteries in the world. BYD also has a little side division called BYD Auto, which just happens to be the biggest selling plug-in electric car company in the world. If you catch a green taxi in Shenzhen, it's probably an electric car made by BYD. Tencent is another name you've probably never heard, but they make Chinese social media platforms QQ and WeChat, with over 1 billion active users and rapidly gaining ground on Facebook. Shenzhen is like an alternate reality where the entire world revolves around engineering, design and manufacturing. In most major cities around the world, the street-level advertising is for luxury consumer goods like clothes and handbags. But in Shenzhen, you walk through an underpass, and the billboards are advertising reels of parts for pick-and-place machines. Walk down any of the major roads in the centre of town, and all you see are major electronics brands. Walk into main road shops and you can buy any electronic gadget, part or tool that you can imagine. Whether you just want a single component or you want all the equipment required to fit out a complete electronics factory, you can buy it right here. If you've bought anything electronic in the last couple of decades, at least some of your money has probably ended up in the city. This is the epicenter of the global electronics manufacturing industry. Shenzhen is a city of wild contrasts. The main roads are shiny and clean with Starbucks and McDonald's easy to find. But walk just a few blocks east of Huaicheng North Road and you'll break through the shiny veneer and see more of the real Shenzhen, with street vendors cooking food on the footpath and constant noise and construction. You can pay $10 for a coffee on the main street, or go to a dingy back alley bar about 200 metres away and pay 30 cents for a bottle of a local beer like Tsingtao. A meal in a fancy restaurant could cost you $200, Or an evening of eating and drinking in a local street barbecue joint could cost you less than $5. There are BMWs and Teslas everywhere, but electric mopeds are the mainstay of local deliveries. If Shenzhen is the global centre of the electronics industry, then the intersection of Huaicheng North Road and Shenan Middle Road in Huaicheng Bay is the dead centre of the bullseye. On opposite sides of the road are the two competing electronics markets, SEG, or Shenzhen Electronics Group, on the east, and HQ Mart on the west. Both of these markets are packed with tiny stalls, all selling electronic parts, tools, or services. If you want a particular type of switch or an LED or a reel of components for a pick-and-place machine, or tools or anything else you can imagine, you can buy it here. Don't be deceived by how tiny these stalls are. They might only be a couple of square meters, and it might look like disorganized chaos with kids running around. But each of these stalls is either an independent dealer or a representative of a factory somewhere on the outskirts of Shenzhen. You can walk up and buy a handful of parts for your project, but that's not why they are here. The stock they have at the stall is small quantities, so that engineers can use them for prototyping and design them into whatever products they're working on. The real reason these stalls are here is so that those same engineers will come back after making their prototypes and place orders for thousands or hundreds of thousands of parts when their product goes into production. They're not here to make money on onesies and twosies, they're here to sell millions. It looks like a crazy supersized weekend swap meet, but billions of dollars of business is conducted right here in the markets. The very first time you visit one of the markets, your first impression is that it's the biggest electronics parts superstore you've ever seen in your life. It's overwhelming and you can't believe how much is in there. But then you begin to realise that you're only looking at a small part of one floor in a multi-storey building. And every single floor of the building is full of electronics suppliers. Then it dawns on you that it's not just this building, it's entire city blocks. In fact, the Huaicheng Bay electronics market area is so big that it covers entire districts of the city. There's no hard and fast rule, but in general different types of suppliers tend to group together based on the industry they serve. For general components, the best place is around SEG Plaza and HQ Mart. There's a district for cell phone parts too, including rather shady items like bare iPhone PCBs and bootleg schematics. There are whole buildings full of parts and products for security and surveillance, smart wearables, tablets, LCD panels, more phone parts, LEDs. Name some kind of electronic device or part, and there are bound to be dozens of suppliers within walking distance of each other. Now that Shenzhen has been a manufacturing powerhouse for several decades, we're starting to see the first generation of young people who have grown up within this creative environment taking their place in the local workforce, and also starting their own businesses. So this is the fast-paced, ultra-competitive environment where ITEAD was born, in a city built on money from electronics and obsessed with chasing the next big thing. Now this is the main ITEAD office where their administrative staff receive orders and plan production, all of those administrative sort of things. In a little alcove just coming off the side of their main office area is this mini showroom. They have all the different Sonoff models here attached to the wall. For example, here is the Sonoff SV. It's connected up to the solenoid so they control it, just running off a plug pack. No mains are required. All the different Sonoff models are along here so that they can demonstrate them and test them. This is a little demonstration system in a box. There's a whole range of Sonoff devices here. Got a little camera connected up here, a lot of different devices. These are the DIN rail mounted output controllers, so this is similar to what I have in my switchboard to control all the devices around the house. Just these are Sonoff, whereas I'm using relays in DIN rail bases. Down here we have Sonoff TH. So it has the temperature and the humidity sensor. The Sonoff factory has multiple floors. Each floor is laid out the same way, with a large open area where manual assembly is done, and a second area that is sealed off, where pick-and-place machines put all the parts on the circuit boards. The process starts with bare PCBs being fed through a solder paste machine. which uses a stencil to apply solder to the pads where parts will be attached. The conveyor belt then moves the pasted PCB through to a series of pick-and-place machines, where individual components are placed on each board. Next, the boards move through a reflow oven, which is a bit like a huge pizza oven, to melt the solder paste and solder the parts in place. Finally, they move through an automated optical inspection system that checks for problems on the board, before finishing at the far end of the assembly line with all the surface mount components in place. At this point, the Sonoffs have come off the production line where all the surface mount parts are fitted, and they need to still have some through-hole parts put on. So they're coming in here from the right, and then this big line of Sonoffs comes all the way through here into the next stage of production. So here we can see the mini panels. The Sonoffs themselves come on panels which have a few of them together. Just looking at there, it looks like there are 10, it's 2 rows of 5. That little panel is then clipped into a carrier board. That carrier goes onto the conveyor belt, and then through-hole parts are added to it. There we go, that's another set of 10 Sonoffs ready to have the extra parts loaded. Right now this operator is fitting the relay which controls the actual output on the Sonoff. She has a little tray of them in front of her, and they are being inserted into the boards. Then a plate is put on top to hold everything down, because what's going to happen next is these boards will go through a wave soldering station. Here you can see the entrance to the wave soldering station. The little trays that hold the set of 10 Sonoffs, those little mini panels, come in from this end and are fed through the wave solderer. Inside this is a big bath of molten solder. What it does is brush across the bottom of the circuit board, and it solders the pins of all of the extra items that have just been installed. So the relay that's just been fitted into the top of the board at the last station is now going to be soldered on. And here we have the output of the wave solderer. I can see one of the little carriers is just about to come out of the conveyor belt. It'll come down to this final operator, and he will remove it from its packaging, put it in the box, ready to move on to the next step of production. You can see that he's wearing gloves because at this point the circuit board will be very hot. This operator is clipping off some of the through-hole legs. You can see that he's doing it inside a box with a clear lid over the front. That way any of the legs that suddenly shoot off aren't going to get in his eyes or go anywhere else they shouldn't. It's then being passed on to the operator on the right. He's using a soldering iron to touch up any areas such as the extra solder that goes onto the tracks to increase their current carrying capacity. If there are any points where there isn't quite enough solder, he can add some more and fix it up here and make sure everything is spot on. After the boards have been assembled, they need to have the firmware installed. This little jig allows very quick connection to be made. When you want to upgrade the firmware on your Sonoff, what you typically do is solder little header pins onto the spare headers. But this is what they were originally designed for. They're not really meant to have pins put into them. This little jig has pogo pins, which are spring-loaded test pins. When the operator pushes down on the handle, it makes contact with those pads on the circuit board. There's no need to have actual pins because they're only going to be connecting for a few seconds. And here you can see how fast the process is. Each of these boards, as it's being loaded, is having the firmware flashed onto the ESP8266, and then if the process completes, she gets an OK on the display, puts the sticker on it and moves it along. After the firmware has been installed, which we saw happens very quickly in that last process, it moves on to functional testing. Each of these test jigs can take it looks like 6 Sonoffs at a time. So the operator opens the jig, puts the Sonoffs all in place, closes it, and it makes the connections that are necessary. There we can see that it looks like one of them failed. So that particular Sonoff has been put aside and another one is being put in its place. So the failed unit will now be sent back for further testing or rework to investigate what happened. And now we can see that there is a complete set. All 6 of those passed testing, so they can now be marked as approved. The little QA sticker will be ticked and they will move on to the next stage of the process. So here we have Sonoff circuit boards being loaded into the cases. These have already been tested, they've had the firmware loaded, so these are almost ready to ship off to customers. So the next stage is once the PCBs have been put into the main part of the shell of the case, the base has to be fitted on. So that's being done at this stage. So at this point, the board has its firmware loaded, it's in the case, and it's ready for final testing. You can also see some procedures just mounted up on the wall. Each of the steps of manufacturing has a series of procedures that need to be followed to ensure that nothing is missed out. After the Sonoffs have been fully fitted into their cases, they are loaded into this test jig. You can see that it has pogo pins, which are little compressible pins on both sides. When the handle is pushed, it slides a little sled along which engages the pins onto the contacts on the Sonoff. So there is no need to screw any wire into it. The connections are just made through those little pogo pins. The tester then has lights attached. Right now it's running through a series of tests. You can see the LEDs on the tops of the Sonoffs are flashing. The operator will check that everything is okay, pulls them back out and then puts them back onto the conveyor belt. Then the next lot are loaded and the test process repeats. At this stage of the production line, all of the units that are coming down have finished that testing process that we just saw a moment ago. So we know these ones have passed all of the quality control checks. What's happening now is the QC stickers are being put on. So if you have ever opened up a Sonoff and in order to flash your own firmware, put Tasmotor on it or whatever, this is where the stickers are going on that you cut to void that warranty. Even though the devices themselves are handled very carefully all the way down production, most of the operators that are handling the external cases are wearing gloves. It's still very important to make sure that the final finish is very good. So you can see here that there are little cleaning cloths being used. Each of the units is polished up to make sure that when you pull it out of the box at the end, it's perfectly clean. Now right at the end of the process, the Sonoff is put into the retail box, put aside, and then the final operator is taking the boxes and packing them in bulk packages which they can send off to their warehouse. They're held in the warehouse and shipped out to you and me. Now that we've seen the office where all of the design is done and we've seen the production facility where the boards are put together, we're going to go and have a look at the warehouse. This is where the finished products are put and then put in boxes and shipped out to the customers. So here we have an assortment of different Sonoff models that are all packed and ready to go. This is where they get put into final ship packaging and shipped off to you, the customer. I'm surrounded by Sonoffs. The Sonoff packaging has just been updated. If you've bought one really recently, it might come in this brand new packaging. Looks a little bit different to what you might have seen before. ITEAD is working hard to make sure that the products are presented really well. They want to make them have a good impression on the customer. Now this is the updated packaging for the S20, which is the UK smart plug, and TH10, which is the Sonoff with the temperature and humidity input. It's much more like unboxing an iPhone now. It's a very Apple experience. You take the cover off the top and the S20 is right there. And you can also see that it's got the CE mark on here. These are now certified, so you don't need to worry about using them in the UK. The previous versions of the packaging had Chinese on the outside, but because these are going to an English speaking customer, they need to be all English on the outside. So this new updated packaging has English on the outside instead of Chinese. It's a really nice looking box. And this is the updated English packaging for the TH10. So it's got the, it shows the version for the temperature and humidity sensor input. So thank you for coming on this tour around ITEAD and the Sonoff production facility. This is the production office, and I'm here with Yo-Yo and Vivi. Yes. Yo-Yo is the sales manager for the Sonoff product, and she has been looking after this product right from the start.
Yes.
Vivi is marketing assistant, and I have spoken to Vivi by email many times, and she has sent me many products to test. So thank you very much for allowing me to come on this tour.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's been a great honor.
Do the promotion and the introduction. Yes,
great.
Yes, very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
So thanks for watching. Now go and build something cool, and I'll see you next time. 你好, superhumans. I am... sorry.